Welcome to Cool Seminary Tutorials. Hi, I'm Professor Wendy. Did you ever wonder where were the women in our history, given that not much is said about women and their accomplishments in many of our history books? Well, thankfully this is changing, but we still have a long ways to go. Today I'm excited to highlight the religious beliefs that appear in 5 of Abigail Adams' letters to her husband, John Adams, and to their son, John Quincy Adams. These letters were written between 1775 and 1780 during the years in which the American Revolution took place. My source for these quotes is Ruther and Keller's Women and Religion in America series, Volume 2. This book may be found in university libraries and used bookstores if you're interested in reading further than what I'll be doing here. Abigail Adams was born of Puritan ancestry, as was her husband John, and raised in 18th century New England, Massachusetts Bay Colony. This was a time when society expected women, above all, to be good wives and mothers, and to support both their husband's civic work and their son's future civic leadership. This was a time when women were expected to speak their own thoughts and ideas aloud only at home, in quiet conversations with their menfolk. The home was women's only socially acceptable sphere of influence, and anything women said had to be in deference to menfolk, regarding both matters at home and having to do with men's public roles. So historians have named this perspective, which was common in the 17th and 18th centuries, Republican motherhood. It was a gendered form of civil religion, really. Women were expected to appear publicly only as permitted by their husbands, and always to support the values of civic virtue, public service, and sound morality as predetermined by men. The correspondence of Abigail Adams reflects these values and this time period, and it represents the role that many women fulfilled in New England and elsewhere during this time period. Although Abigail Adams was one who did not rest easily with these restrictions, and she is known to have pressed a little bit at the edges, leading the way for women to gradually have greater roles in society. But it was a long, slow transition. Let's look briefly at 5 of Abigail Adams's letters that reflect this assigned social role for women, and how this wife of a future president and the mother of another future president used her role to exert what she understood to be moral, ethical, and religious influence upon both men and her nation. First, on November 12th, 1775, 8 months before the Declaration of Independence was issued, Abigail wrote to her husband, John Adams, "I could not join today in the petitions of our worthy parson for a reconciliation between our no longer parent state, but tyrant state, and these colonies. Let us separate. They are unworthy to be our brethren. Let us renounce them, and instead of supplications as formerly for their prosperity and happiness, let us beseech the Almighty to blast their counsels and bring to naught all their devices." Next, she wrote to John Adams in June of 1776, "I feel no great anxiety at the large armament designed against us. The remarkable interpositions of heaven in our favor cannot too gratefully be acknowledged. He who led the Israelites in the wilderness, who clothes the lilies of the field and feeds the young ravens when they cry, will not forsake a people engaged in so righteous cause if we remember his loving kindness." Next, Abigail wrote to John Adams, March 31st, 1776, "I long to hear that you have declared an independency, and by the way in the new code of laws which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies, and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of the husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion, and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. That your sex are naturally tyrannical is a truth so thoroughly established as to admit of no dispute. But such of you as wish to be happy willingly, give us the harsh title of master, for the more tender and endearing one of friend. Men of sense in all ages abhor those customs which treat us only as vassals of your sex. Regard us then as beings placed by Providence under your protection, and in imitation of the Supreme Being, make use of that power only for our happiness. Fourth, she wrote to John Adams July 21st, 1776. Last Thursday, after hearing a very good sermon, I went with the multitude into King Street to hear the proclamation for independence read and proclaimed. Some field pieces with the train were brought there, the troops appeared under arms, and all the inhabitants assembled there. The cry from the balcony was, "God save our American States," and then 3 cheers rended the air. The bells rang, the privateers fired, the forts and batteries, the cannons were discharged, the platoons followed, and every face appeared joyful. After dinner, the king's arms were taken down from the State House, and every vestige of him from every place in which it appeared, and burnt in King Street. This ends royal authority in this state, and all the people shall say, Amen. Finally, Abigail wrote to John Quincy Adams when he was 13 while traveling in Europe with his father on March 20th, 1780. If you have a due sense of your preservation, your next consideration will be, for what purpose are you continued in life? It is not to rove from clime to clime, to gratify an idle curiosity, but every new mercy you receive is a new debt upon you, a new obligation to a diligent discharge of the various relations in which you stand connected. In the first place, to your great preserver. In the next, to society in general, in particular to your country, to your parents, and to yourself. The only sure and permanent foundation of virtue is religion. Let this important truth be engraven upon your heart, and that the foundation of religion is the belief of the only one God, and a just sense of his attributes, as a being infinitely wise, just, and good, to whom you owe the highest reverence, gratitude, and adoration, who superintends and governs all nature, even to clothing the lilies of the field, and hearing the young ravens when they cry, but more particularly regards man whom he created after his own image, and breathed into him an immortal spirit capable of happiness beyond the grave, to the attainment of which he is bound to the performance of certain duties, which all tend to the happiness and welfare of society. In future videos, we'll begin to look at how this prescribed role for women in the history of the United States and in the history of Christianity changed over time. I'm Professor Wendy. Thanks for watching. Please take a moment to rate this video and offer any suggestions you may have, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Most of all, have fun learning.